after the tedious planning for new purchases has been completed, the buyer visits the market to make the purchases. The number of times a buyer visits the market during the year is dependent upon the size of the company, its proximity to the market, and the type of merchandise it sells. Some buyers, especially those seeking off-price goods, such as the ones who purchase for the Steinmart chain, make frequent visits, as often as every week. Others, like those who purchase for traditional stores, might come to market during the market weeks, the periods when the new lines are first introduced, and perhaps once a month. And still others, who are a short distance away from the market, might make their visits as often as a few times a week. Whatever the situation, the market visit must be carefully planned at home before the actual arrival date. The various stages for making the purchases in the wholesale arenas include preparations for the visit, market specialist conferences, fashion show attendance, resource visits, negotiating the purchase, and disseminating product information to the staff. Having met with the divisional merchandise manager, to whom they report directly, and the chief of the merchandising division, the general merchandise manager, to finalize the purchasing plans, the buyer is ready to make preparations for the visit to the wholesale market. The initial task is to make travel and hotel reservations. This is extremely important, especially during peak purchasing periods such as market weeks. During these times, buyers come from all over the globe to the various wholesale markets to inspect the new season's offerings. Travel reservations to the market cities are usually booked very far in advance to make certain that the required departure and return times are best suited to the individual's needs. Hotel reservations are often at a premium, and those who plan will be assured of getting the hotels of their choice. Prearranged appointments with vendors are also a must during the preparation stage. With so many retailers converging on the marketplace at one time, it is necessary to plan in advance. In just a few days, most buyers must screen scores of lines. By securing the appointments in advance, the time spent at each showroom will be more productive. If the retailer has representation with a market specialist organization or resident buying office, as they're also referred to, this is yet another appointment that must be scheduled. These reps are contracted to work with many retailers, and during peak purchasing periods, they are inundated with requests for appointments to review the state of the market. If one must have such a meeting, early planning is essential. During the market week periods, there are often fashion shows given by the major collections. Entry into these arenas, such as those presented at 7th on 6th, is guaranteed only by invitation. Without an advance ticket, seating is unlikely. Once all of these preparations have been made, it is off to the market to conduct the business at hand. The initial step during the market visit is to the market specialist conferences mentioned earlier. One of the principal roles played by these experts is daily coverage of the market throughout the year. Each and every day, they examine the market to evaluate vendors' offerings, the latest in fabrications, color trends, new vendor collections, price points, fashion directions, and every other area that might be of concern to the retailers they represent. The largest of the market specialist organizations is Doniger Associates. Located right in the heart of the wholesale market in New York City, they specialize in apparel for the entire family, accessories, and home furnishings. In their employ are a host of resident buyers or specialists who provide the store buyers with a wealth of information for each merchandise classification.
Here at Doniger, the buyer is considered a market specialist. What we do basically is we shop the market and we come back and we report to our stores, our member stores. Or we conduct seminars, we conduct workshops, we conduct meetings, we work one-on-one with their stores, be it phone, fax, however, but we try to get the information to the stores as quickly as possible, what's going on out in the market.
They also offer specially designed merchandise programs for their accounts.
Some of the things that we do here at Doniger also, we can do in-house programs for our stores where we can go and work with the manufacturer and do a small mini program that we can make exclusively for our stores, our member stores. And sometimes we'll do a line such as this that have exclusive fabrics on their line, like this PK silk, for instance, will be in the season's, bright colors. And we'll do great things like the drawstring pant, which is like the key pant for the season that we want our stores to have. It's a must body this season. And there are lots of things in my area. This whole lifestyle dressing is coming on strong. Things that are somewhat artisan influenced with lots of mixing of textures and so forth. And things in the color palettes that are right for the season, like the new gray, which has become the new black for this season. These are things that we, obviously show our stores when they sit down and work with us visually, so we can show them what's happening currently in the market.
In addition to the market information gathered directly by the resident buyer, fashion news is provided to the store's buyers and merchandisers by David Wolf, America's leading fashion forecaster.
As a fashion forecaster, I work with retailers by alerting them as to what's going to happen in fashion just before the season begins. That's a little bit later than the way I relate information to designers or fiber manufacturers who need the information 2 or even 3 years ahead of the season. Retailers need to know just before they go into the market to make their buys about what's going to be important, who's going to buy it, whether or not they should jump on a trend or not. I come up with my information by always keeping my ear to the ground, as it were. As a forecaster, I have to know what's going on in so many areas outside fashion, because fashion is much bigger than just the fashion industry these days. So I spend my time doing as my job what most people do just for fun. I read, I go to movies, I go to plays, I go to museums, and I certainly shop nonstop. People watch all the time. And that gives me a feeling for the rhythm and the speed of fashion. I think everybody knows what's going to happen in fashion in the future. Things are going to go shorter, and then longer, and then shorter again, darker, brighter. There's a certain swing of the fashion pendulum to it. The trick is to get the timing right. And that's vital for retailers, because retailers work in so many different ways, so many different timetables for so many different kinds of customers. What's right for one retailer in any given season may be very, very wrong and disastrous for another retailer.
With the information gathered at the market specialist conferences, the buyer is ready to begin the purchasing process. Although some buyers head straight for the vendor showrooms or trade expositions if they're in session to examine the new collections, many choose to attend the major fashion presentations presented by the designers and manufacturers if the visit is during market week. The largest of these shows is called 7th on 6th. Housed in spectacular tents on the grounds of Bryant Park in New York City, the buyers are able to see numerous fashion collections. By viewing these collections in advance of the vendor showroom visits, the buyers are able to pre-evaluate the lines under the best conditions. This arena affords them an overview of the fashions without the rush often associated with showroom visits during the peak selling periods, such as Market Week. The resource visits are next on the agenda. Armed with a predetermined 6-month plan and model stock, the buyer begins the task by first heading for his or her scheduled showroom appointments. This is the first order of the day, since past sales records indicate that previously purchased merchandise from these vendors proved to be profitable in the past. It should be understood, however, that a seasoned buyer is always on the lookout for new merchandise resources. These might be found at the various trade expositions that feature scores of vendors. By attending such shows, a quick overview of what is current in the industry is easily achieved. Of course, some vendors do not maintain permanent showrooms, and the only place their lines may be seen are at these shows. Also, it is possible to seek out new resources through the use of information centers in some major wholesale markets. In New York City's Garment Center, for example, visiting buyers may stop at the fashion kiosk on 7th Avenue. There they may have questions answered about new vendor locations and the types of merchandise they feature. This is an invaluable tool for the buyers. It is very important when visiting a previously used vendor that the same sales representative who has serviced the account in the past will show the new line. If a good relationship has been established between the buyer and seller, and there's an understanding of the store's needs based upon past experiences, it is likely that the sales representative will suggest the right merchandise. Of course, when new vendors are being considered for the first time, extra caution must be exercised. because no track record has been established. At the beginning of a new season, the lines may include as many as 100 samples and sometimes even more. Retailers have neither the need for every item nor the budget to accommodate each one. With this in mind, selection of the items best suited for the retailer's customers is a task that the buyer is confronted with. An informed and trusted vendor representative can make suggestions for narrowing down the line. Of course, the buyer makes the ultimate decision.
Could we lower the neckline?
Definitely, lowering the neckline is a great option.
Generally, the lines are broken down into groups or categories based upon such factors as price points, silhouettes, fabrications, and colors. Each group should be examined, one piece at a time, with the ones that seem most appropriate to fit into the predetermined model stock set aside for further consideration. After the entire collection has been reviewed, the pre-selected items should be examined once more, removing questionable or uncertain items from consideration until the desired number is reached. Once the merchandise has been selected, there are many different factors that must be considered before any order may be placed. These include delivery dates, discounts, advertising and promotional allowances, and transportation costs. Each must be carefully negotiated so that the buyer can bring the best deal back to the company. Delivery dates must be carefully spelled out. Since the purchases are made as far as 6 months in advance of a season, it is critical that the deliveries are carefully scheduled. The merchandise must be received at a time when it will be needed to satisfy the customer's needs. If, for example, the retailer is one whose image is a fashion-first operation, then the merchandise must arrive at the earliest possible time. If the delivery is not as specified, the competition might gain an edge. Deliveries after the desired times, especially for fashion merchandise, will abbreviate the selling season. The later it arrives, the fewer days it can be sold at the regular prices, and reorders of hot sellers may be too late to be profitable. Each order must note a starting and a conclusion date for deliveries. This is extremely important, since entire orders are not often shipped at one time unless the purchase is for existing merchandise that is in the vendor's inventory. Oftentimes, the delivery instructions use the words "as ready" with a completion date. This means the merchandise may be shipped as it comes out of production, but delivery must not go past the date specified on the order. If the merchandise is shipped to the retailer past the indicated dates on the order, it need not be accepted. A seasoned buyer understands that late deliveries can result in markdowns. Discounts are reductions from the vendor's stated prices. Through careful negotiation, the buyer might be able to acquire the merchandise at lower prices. Some of the discounts are standard in each industry and need not be negotiated. In fashion merchandise, for example, there is a cash discount for prompt payment. When the invoice is paid within the allotted time, there is a discount typically from 2% to 8%. Payments received after the discount period generally result in the loss of the discount. When very large orders are placed, the buyer might be able to obtain a quantity discount. This is extremely valuable for the major organizations that are capable of placing sizable orders. Some merchandise may be bought and delivered long before it is actually needed by the retailer. In such cases, the buyer might be able to secure a seasonal discount. With the purchase of swimsuits, for example, the peak selling period may begin in May. If the buyer agrees to accept the deliveries in March, the vendor might be willing to offer this extra discount. As an inducement to receive payment for the goods even before the dates that allow for the cash discounts, some vendors might offer an extra reduction known as an anticipation allowance. This enables the vendor to receive payment early and for the store to benefit with the lower cost. Many vendors do not automatically offer this discount, so the buyer must negotiate it. Dating the order. It's a term used to indicate that payment for the merchandise is not based on the actual delivery date, but on a different date. For example, if an order states that delivery will be for January 25th, it might be dated as February 25th, giving the retailer an extra month to pay the bill and still receive all the prearranged discounts. Such a negotiation helps the retailer to sell more of the goods before payment is due. Skilled buyers try to get as much order dating as possible. Advertising and promotional allowances are vital to the success of the majority of most retail operations. In order to remain competitive and keep the names of their companies current in the minds of potential customers, advertising and promotion programs are necessary. The costs of these endeavors become more and more costly every day. Newspaper and magazine ad expenditures keep spiraling upward, as do the expenses for broadcast advertising. In order to reduce these expenses, buyers are always negotiating for advertising and promotional allowances. Oftentimes, deals may be struck for cooperative advertising programs. This arrangement requires the vendors to equally share in the advertising costs of their merchandise with the retailers. Thus, if an advertisement costs $10,000, it will only be a $5,000 expense to the retailer. Transportation costs are still another expense that generally belongs to the retailer. Through careful negotiation, the vendor might assume some of these expenses, especially if the retail account is an important one. In some instances, the costs for transportation might be split among the two. After all of the details of the order have been worked out, the actual order may be written at this point, or completed when the buyer returns home from the market. Although the purchase of the right merchandise is vital to the success of the operation, its arrival onto the selling floor does not guarantee its success. Professional buyers understand that by disseminating product information to the staff, they are helping to make selling easier. Some retailers have their buyers communicate with managers through the use of newsletters, conferences, or faxes. One of the newest methods for the dissemination of information is achieved through the use of in-house communication programs. At Dayton Hudson, for example, the buyers are able to relay product information via their satellite network.
Well, what other things do you do to make this great? I know that you have, you're very generous through the chest.
Let me talk a little bit about spec or specifications.
Sure.
There are a lot of engineering details in a shirt. The Woodward at 15 and a half has a 48 inch chest, one of the wider ones in the market, wider than any other private brand. It has a 22-inch armhole, and I work through sculpting of this so that it just sculpts right. The armhole is important because then it fits underneath the jacket. These, after all, are dress shirts meant to be worn with a tie, meant to be worn under a jacket.
Whatever the arrangement for the dissemination of product information to the staff, it is one more step that helps to bring greater profits to the retailer. We have learned that when the buyer visits the market to make the purchases, there are many different tasks that must be accomplished to make the trip a productive one. After the preliminary travel plans have been completed, he or she must interface with a number of people in the field and perform a variety of tasks. Included are meetings with market specialists to assess the state of the marketplace in terms of new style directions, the latest in fabrications and color, and new vendors that have come onto the scene. Fashion show attendance at major arenas such as 7th on 6th to see some of the collections under one roof. Of course, this is only for buyers of specific merchandise. Visits to new and old resources in vendor showrooms or trade shows. The negotiation of the purchase that includes cash, quantity, and seasonal discounts, as well as the potential to obtain anticipation allowances. The agreement of the vendors to provide advertising and promotional allowances. The sharing of transportation expenses between the vendor and the retailer. The actual writing and placement of the orders once all of the information gathered in the market has been digested. And the dissemination of product information about the merchandise that has been purchased to the store's managers and sales associates. After all has been said and done, it is the ultimate consumer who will decide whether or not his or her needs have been satisfied by the buyer's efforts.
Okay, so, by the way, if you were laughing at some of the fashions, I'm 100% with you, and it definitely shows just how old this video is. So, okay, let's go through. first of all, preparing for the marketplace, and let me get into the camera here. So I know it's kind of ironic to talk about booking hotel and airfare right now when we have, almost a sort of ban on domestic travel. But when a buyer is getting ready to visit the marketplace, market is generally a really insane time for a city, especially a city like New York, Dallas for sure. During market, I can tell you that the hotels around, just around 35 here in our neighborhood get absolutely packed. So it's really important to be able to plan your market trip, sometimes months in advance, especially when it comes to airfare. The other thing that makes Dallas a little bit different from New York is that you guys know Dallas is generally multi-vendor showrooms, right? So the idea of making actual appointments to come into many of our showrooms, it doesn't really exist, right? Buyers will show up to the Dallas Market Center and they'll pretty much just go shop the market, and they don't necessarily stick to appointments. In other cities like New York, where the showrooms are based in corporate buildings, there are specific market appointments, and so during the prep time, buyers are going to actually make appointments with their wholesale vendors weeks before market happens. Sometimes for some larger vendors, it takes the buyer maybe an entire day to buy the line. So literally one entire day of your market trip is spent with one vendor. I know at Ralph Lauren, our buyers would come in, they would indeed spend an entire day buying our line. And I'll get more in a minute to why that would be. Anyway, the next thing the video talked about was market specialists. And I know I've mentioned to you the term resident buying office before. And I mentioned the Doniger Group, and ta-da, here's the video about the Doniger Group. They are probably one of the leaders in the United States. And so they are a market specialist. What they do is they shop the market on behalf of their member buyers, and they do purchasing. They also provide trend forecasting information, like I mentioned in part one of the video. But the other thing that they do is they help develop private label. And so just to make sure everybody is 100% clear as to what that means, private label is the manufacturing of goods that is specific to one retailer. So a company like Neiman Marcus, 99% of what they buy is branded goods from vendors, but they do carry Neiman Marcus labeled goods. A resident buying office like the Doniger Group can actually help to design, develop, and get made those private labeled goods. Okay, I want to make a big correction about something in the video that was mentioned about fashion shows and fashion show attendance. Turn my lights on. So once upon a time, New York Fashion Week, which is the big American fashion week, was called 7th on 6th. Not sure if you picked that up in the video. You saw the flags flying in Bryant Park. Let me explain to you the old name, 7th on 6th. So, as you already know, the garment district in New York, basically the heart of the fashion industry, is 7th Avenue. And you know, because I've shown you pictures, that 7th Avenue is also called Fashion Avenue between 34th and 42nd Streets. The reason it was called 7th on 6th is because Bryant Park, which is where all the big fashion show tents were staged, is on 6th Avenue. So 7th on 6th means that 7th Avenue, the fashion industry, was coming to 6th Avenue, Bryant Park, for the big New York Fashion Week fashion show presentations at the tents. That has since moved to Lincoln Center, which is, if you don't know, it's the kind of the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And Lincoln Center now showcases all of those fashion shows for New York Fashion Week. So it's no longer called 7th on 6th. They renamed it Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week for a little while because Mercedes-Benz came on as a major sponsor of the event. And now it really doesn't necessarily have any one name. The sponsors change every year, and it's become much less centralized. So many of the major fashion houses, they're kind of showing like all over New York. So there isn't this idea of like, you get your time spot for a tent show in Bryant Park. It really has just spread out. So now we just call it NYFW, New York Fashion Week. Okay, so that's my explanation about that, from Bryant Park to Lincoln Center and now just kind of all over the place. Okay, the resource visits, and that is you going to visit your actual vendors, your showrooms, your wholesalers. And again, I made the point that in Dallas, we have primarily multi-vendor showrooms. So Market is actually a little bit more convenient in that, you know, under one roof, or technically 3 roofs, you know, you've got 2,200 showrooms that are operating during certain market weeks. In New York, it's a little bit different because you're making appointments to go physically to your to the vendors that you're going to go meet with, and meet with the account executives at that vendor. And then there are trade shows, and we talked a lot about Magic being the largest trade show in our industry. Magic is a great resource for those vendors who either don't have a permanent showroom, or new vendors that, you know, you're yet to discover. So that's the beauty of Magic, of trade show. One thing I want to make a point about is that during the market week visits, during the actual showroom visits, you may or may not be doing the actual assortment planning. And what I mean by that is, for a smaller vendor, you may actually be choosing on the spot what styles and colors and sizes are you buying for each of the stores in your chain. You may actually be doing that physical planning at the market appointment. For larger vendors, or if you are a larger buyer of a company like Target, let's say, it is impossible to do that work literally during the market appointment. It is obviously a much more complicated process. So a lot of times orders are not physically written until the buyer gets back to, you know, the home office and really puts an assortment plan together. Sometimes buyer and planner will do that together, okay? So a lot of times the market appointment really is just about looking at big picture, what is the merchandise that we're buying, and then figuring out the assortment plan for that later. Okay, moving over here to this side of the board. So the next part of the video is about negotiations. Now, I do want to spend a good minute or two on this topic right now, and then I'm going to show you how to actually calculate a lot of this stuff when we get to a different part of our course, a different lecture. But what are the things that you, the buyer, can negotiate? And I'm going to say it a different way. What are the things that you as a buyer need to know about that you can negotiate? Because a lot of times a vendor is not going to say, you know, here's a menu of things that you can negotiate. What would you like to negotiate? So the first thing is delivery dates, and that is generally something that a wholesaler is going to talk to you about. Delivery dates basically are a start ship date and a cancel date. Write that down, okay? A start ship date, although it sounds like it's the day goods can start shipping, it's actually the date that you are agreeing to be the first day you can receive the goods. So for example, if I am placing an order right now and I'm going to agree to a June 1st start ship date, that basically means that I will take those goods on June 1st. I am allowing my distribution center or centers to physically receive those goods on June 1st, okay? So that's my start ship date. My cancel date is basically the last day that I am willing to receive those goods. And a lot of times this might be a 10 or 15-day window. Sometimes it's even as much as a 30-day window. But generally, like if I have a June 1st start ship date, I may have a June 15th cancel date. So again, June 1st, first day I'm allowing my distribution center to get those, to receive those goods. A truck can pull in and I'm good to receive those goods. June 15th, last day I'm willing to receive those goods. So if a delivery truck pulls up to my distribution center on June 16th, that purchase order is refused. I have the legal right to refuse those goods because they have not been received within the agreed upon start ship and cancel window. Now, you might be asking, well, or wondering, why would I want to go to market, spend all this time buying these goods and then cancel an order, right? And the reason that you would cancel orders is because that vendor is shipping you late and now you don't have enough time to comfortably get the goods to your store and sell those goods. So that's why we negotiate start ship and cancel windows. And that is, by the way, documented on your purchase order. Another thing that you might negotiate as far as delivery is as ready by a completion date or by a cancel date. And let me explain to you what that means. So a lot of times a vendor is producing things at a manufacturer, and that manufacturer isn't going to get everything ready on one day. Obviously, it may take weeks to make goods. And so that manufacturer is able to ship to the vendor, and the vendor is able to ship to you, the retailer, at your distribution center, goods kind of on an ongoing basis. Think of this as telling Amazon, you know, you ordered 5 or 6 things and you're willing to take them in separate boxes as they're available. It's kind of the same concept. We agreed to as ready, so ship me them in waves as they're ready, and I'll remind you where we saw this, but with a completion date. No more goods by, you know, June 15th. That's a kind of a cancel date, completion date. You might remember that sales report that we reviewed, where even though we were selling sweaters every week, the on-hands, the inventory units of that sweater kept going up each week, even though we were selling sweaters. That is an example of multiple deliveries of the same product. So an as ready by a cancel date or by a completion date. Okay, the next thing that's going to be a big part of the negotiation is what are all of the different discounts that I can negotiate, that I can ask for. I'm going to explain them all to you now, but I'm going to show you how to calculate them during a different lecture. Okay, so the first one is a cash discount. And in a nutshell, all you need to know right now is that this is a discount for paying your invoice on time. Now, let me pivot for a second. What does on time mean? Well, a lot of times on time means the same thing as your cable bill. When you get your cable bill, when you get your cell phone bill, when you get your internet bill, when you get, you know, most bills, in the fine print, on time means net 30, which basically means pay the whole bill in 30 days from the date of the invoice, okay? So a lot of times we can take a cash discount if we pay net 30. If we get that bill paid within 30 days from whatever that invoice date is. It's not the day you opened the envelope or you got the email, the PDF, it's the date that is dated on that invoice, okay? So a cash discount is just a discount for paying on time. A quantity discount is a discount for obviously buying in larger quantities, whether it's hitting a dollar figure or whether it's hitting a unit amount. Obviously, the more that we buy, the deeper the discounts are going to be for us. And again, a lot of times it might be, you know, if you purchase this dollar amount, you get a discount. If you purchase this quantity amount, either you get a discount or you get a cheaper, a lower wholesale price per item. A seasonal discount is a discount for taking goods, taking delivery on goods out of the traditional season. So let's think about this. You know, when would I receive Christmas goods, ornaments, Christmas trees? Probably, I know it sounds shocking to you all, August or September, I might start receiving those goods and getting them to my floor. It would be unusual for me to take Christmas goods in December, okay? Why? Because I already have all my inventory, and unless I'm severely out of something, I'm not really placing orders for Christmas goods in December. So buying Christmas goods in December would result usually in a seasonal discount. We could talk the same about swimwear. We generally would buy swimwear in October, November, December in order to get those goods into our stores for cruise and then for spring, summer. And as you all know, spring, February, March, by April, the spring season is over and a lot of spring goods are marked down. So if I were ordering swimsuits in June, July, that would definitely be seasonal discount because that's kind of at the end of the life of those goods. Okay, so that's a discount for buying goods out of season. A trade discount, I believe video did not mention, but a trade discount is a discount based on who you are, you the buyer. So some wholesalers will give a trade discount if you are a major department store. Some wholesalers will give you a trade discount if you are a major specialty store. Some wholesalers will give a trade discount if you are a small business. So it just depends on what their discount policy is and who you are and whether you would qualify for that trade discount. And then finally, an anticipation discount. So think again, if a cash discount is a discount for paying on time, an anticipation discount is a discount for paying early. Now, you might ask yourself, why would I ever pay a bill early, right? Why would I ever want to take money out of a bank account early? And the answer is, again, to take advantage of an additional discount. You have to remember, manufacturers are spending, and wholesalers and showrooms and vendors, they're spending millions and millions of dollars getting their goods produced. They want to try to make that money back as quickly as possible. So they're going to offer you an additional incentive to pay a bill long before it's due, so that they can start recuperating the money to manufacture all of the goods that they just did. Okay? And then finally, just in terms of discounts, is the idea of dating. I'll save my dating jokes for that lecture, but dating doesn't have to do with, finding yourself a man. Dating has to do with negotiating literally when payment is due. So they mentioned in the video, like, imagine that your cable bill came and it was dated, April 1st. And so bill is due in 30 days by April 30th or May 1st. Dating is pretty much negotiating when the invoice is dated and how much additional time you have to pay an invoice. So it's not just about reducing the invoice by asking for discounts, it's also a lot of times stretching the time that you want to pay the invoice so you can get the goods and start making some money on those goods. Okay, we'll talk lots more about all of those things, discounts and dating, in our negotiations chapter, and I will show you how to calculate all this stuff. Okay, also under negotiations, the idea of advertising, mentioned this already. So we may negotiate any type of vendor allowance for promotional activity. Sometimes a vendor will split the cost of an ad with us or a cost of some type of promotional activity. Sometimes a vendor will say, hey, we want to have hard shops in your stores. Will you share the cost with us? And they'll pay for the installation and maintenance, and we pay for the installation and maintenance, and we split that cost 50-50. Those are all promotional negotiations, advertising negotiations, etc. And then finally, transportation, which we're also going to talk about in our negotiations chapter. But transportation is as simple as, who's going to pay shipping, you or me? And it's a pretty simple answer. And it's whoever the larger company is generally is not going to pay for transportation, for shipping. So, if you are a small mom and pop retailer, you're probably paying for shipping. If you're Macy's, you're probably going to vendors and saying, we don't pay shipping. You want to do business with us, you pay the transportation costs. We'll talk more about that in the negotiations lecture. Okay, and then finally, the last part of the video was dissemination, the dissemination of product information, okay? And that's just a fancy way of saying training. Because think about it, if we're the buyer and we went to market, we know what we bought and nobody else knows it yet, okay? How are we gonna communicate, hey, what's coming? What goods are coming? What vendors are new? What goods are new? What are the trends? What are the colors? What are the fabrications? What are new fits? What's new within the vendors' collections? All of that kind of stuff. And also, maybe how should the goods get merchandised? Is there any important visual merchandising, product merchandising tips? So we need to do that. Some vendors will actually come in and do that, and sometimes the buyers are actually responsible for doing that. That was one of my jobs at Ralph Lauren. I used to do all of the televised, we call them telecasts, and I used to go to some of our major accounts like Macy's, who had a major television studio in the top of the San Francisco Union Square Macy's store. Dillard's has a television studio. I think they used a public television studio out of St. Louis, Missouri. And we would go and film. Sometimes we'd film, sometimes we'd do it live, sometimes we'd have them burned to DVDs. It's tough in stores still, to get access to like a live television reception and stuff like that. But and I'm going to share with you some clips of some of the work that I did on producing and then hosting these training seminars. And a lot of you guys with retail experience, you probably have had various types of training, whether it be video, whether it be a telecast or a WebEx conference, and sometimes low-tech stuff like just a product manual or something like that, whether it's coming from the retail company or if it's coming from the vendor. Okay, so that was your two-part video talking about preparing for the market trip and then physically being in the marketplace and experiencing the, you know, the hustle and bustle of a market, of market. You really can't experience it until you go do it. And for Wade students, that really means, you know, volunteering or getting a paid market job, and going and doing that. And once things get back to normal, there will be the opportunity for all of you to go and to work market and hopefully get paid market jobs. All right, that's it. I will see you guys next week for new topic. Thanks.